Of God in this place. Let us pray. Father, Mother God, we give thanks for this opportunity to open ourselves to the awareness of your presence, allowing your love to flow through us, the light darkening every dark corner of our consciousness, the light healing, lifting, transforming, here and now. We feel your presence in this moment. And in feeling your love, we allow your love to move through us, touching each and every one in this room, spilling out from this room and touching each and every one in this city, moving beyond and touching everyone in this state, in this nation, on this planet. And in that realization, we are blessed. And so it is that together we say, Amen. Well, where angels fear to tread. Read an article this week, I don't know what publication it was in, but it was about the friendship between Ivanka Trump and Chelsea Clinton. I don't know, have you all encountered any of those? I know that there are a bunch of them out there. People Magazine has a spread. I don't think this was in People Magazine, but in any case, it got me to thinking. That's interesting. You know, there was the thought, or there was the anecdote that Donald Trump had actually called Bill Clinton before he had decided to get into the Republican primary race to ask Bill Clinton's opinion of whether or not he should do that. Now, that was rumor as far as I know. I don't know that Bill Clinton confirmed that that was the case, but that's interesting. But it turns out that apparently that Ivanka and Chelsea have a very dear friendship. And so I got to asking myself, could I do that? Is that possible for me to do that? And I suppose it would be possible for me to do that. It is hard to imagine, but nonetheless, having friendship with someone who was tooth and nail in competition with my parents. So I realized that I needed to explore that more deeply. You know, they say that what you need to learn, you need to teach. So here I am this morning teaching that. Could you, Monica, could you bring that down a little bit more? It's still a little bit hot. Okay, thank you. So as I was thinking about this topic, I said, you know, I think a perfect talk title is going to be Where Angels Fear to Tread. And I didn't know why I thought that would be a great talk topic. Maybe it was because I was fearing to tread there. So I decided that I'd better find out more about that title. And we all know that, you know, we are all familiar, or most of us are familiar with that phrase, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And it turns out that line comes from Alexander Pope. He wrote a poem on an essay on criticism. And this was published in 1711, I think it was. And it was directed at this evolving, this emerging literary not resurgence, but surgence of lots of people offering lots of opinions about lots of literary material. And so he wrote a poem about it, and so that phrase came from this poem on literary criticism. And I thought that that was interesting, that I chose a phrase that would be associated with this concept of criticism, which is kind of what this talk is about. By the way, for those of you who are interested, to err is human, to forgive divine, that came also from that same poem. And for those who would like to have one other piece of information, the phrase, "a little learning is a dangerous thing," also came from that poem. So, I don't know, you might go to that poem and find other juicy phrases. But be that as it may. So, as I was practicing with this affirmation this week, and you know the affirmation that I posted on our Facebook, and I had a version of this last week. But God, as divine order, is moving in and through our election process. Peace, love, and joy abound. So as I was practicing that, I was feeling this resistance about, well, you know, it's all well and good, but obviously God is not moving through that person. As I said, this is something I need to learn, okay? So as we consider this, and as we truly get into this affirmation, and we get that emotional charge in this affirmation, which is, and I realized that I failed to make this note last week as I was talking about this affirmation, is that getting an emotional charge into the saying, the repeating of this affirmation, has a greater effect of impressing that affirmation, that truth, on the subconscious mind. So, God, as divine order, is moving in and through our election process. God, as divine order, is moving in and through the election process. God, as divine order, is moving in and through our election process. So, while you may not need to say that out loud, it actually is easier to get the emotion into the affirmation if you say it out loud. But if you have a strong imagination and you have the ability to emote in your imagination, then go for it. But nonetheless, so that's the genesis of this talk this morning, is my challenge in seeing this as an absolute truth in all circumstances, particularly as I was involved in watching some snippets of the convention this week. So, we've heard the phrase that we want to walk a mile in another's shoes. In fact, Steve Martin said, "Before you criticize another, walk a mile in their shoes, and that way you will be a mile away and with their shoes." So, truly, this is, during this period of, regardless of which side of the spectrum you are on, or if you're in the middle of the spectrum, of the political spectrum, it doesn't make any difference. I'm sure, I'm absolutely certain that there is, that regardless of where I would be on the spectrum, I would have a challenge in meeting this idea and fully accepting this idea. That doesn't mean that I shouldn't practice this and make it part of who I am, but nonetheless, I have some work to do here. So, the daily word today, we were talking, well, let me just go back to the daily word. Interestingly, the daily word today is about relationships and about seeing the Christ essence in the other. And certainly that is an important step, to see that Christ essence in each and every one of us. Because as we know intellectually, perhaps not emotionally, but as we know intellectually, we are all a part of the greater, a part of the divine. And the way that we often speak of that is that we are children of the divine. But that divine essence is a part of every one of us. And if we give it the opportunity to express, to press out, if we are willing to give it the opportunity to press out, truly we are an expression of the divine, as is everybody. And it's that as is everybody that is the hard thing oftentimes for us to accept. So as we look at this, when it is hard for me to see our connection, I can improve the situation by lifting my awareness, by taking my eyes off of the falderall and lifting it higher, to see that the falderall is all about the challenges and the reactions of the ego. And that aspect of consciousness which insists upon separation from each other and from God is the source of all the falderall. So as we lift our awareness above and see the Christ essence in each and every one of us, we can detach ourselves from our own connection with that ego. And we can see that we are in fact not separate and apart, and this takes practice. We can see that we're not separate and apart, but rather are part of the all that is all. We are the divine expression here. I redirect my negative reactions by remembering the Christ in me, and then I can begin to recognize the Christ in others. In my mind and heart, I connect our higher selves. Beyond the outer facade of hurt feelings, fears, and apprehension is our Christ identity. Seeing it in others helps them see it in themselves. This is a perfect daily word for this talk. I have an online daily word, right? So I didn't see this as I didn't see what this was going to be as I was preparing the talk, but very solid connection between the two. But I'd like to go further and offer this. As we look at the offerings that Jesus offered us in both Matthew and Luke, there is the log in the eye passage. And in Luke 6:41 and 42, why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye but do not notice the log in your own? Or how can you say to your neighbor, friend, let me take the little speck out of your eye, when you yourself do not see the log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. So what do you think is the log here? What's the log in our eye? The log in our eye is that we are looking into the world through the perspective of the ego. That aspect of consciousness which insists upon separation from each other and from God. So as we are looking into the world through the ego, our vision is substantially clouded. It's substantially obstructed. And it's obstructed because we do not see our connection with each other. And as the daily word suggests, lift your gaze, raise your awareness, look out into your world and see that the connections that you have are far more valid with each other than the separation that you imagine to exist. So take the log out of your own eye, take the perspective of the ego and set it aside and look once again through the eyes of the Christ essence that is in you. So there are 3 steps that I would offer to empathy. Come on. First of all, imagine being in the other's situation. Walk a mile in their shoes. Allow yourself to understand what the motive is, or attempt to understand what the motive of the other person is. Why is it that they are acting as they are? What is it in their experience that leads them to the conclusion that this is the right and perfect reaction, whatever that reaction is? Notice that our reactions are largely based upon two things: how we view the situation and what our experience has been related to situations like that in the past. And it is from those two visions that we will respond in the moment. And that response is something that we can anticipate at least. We can imagine what that would be. So imagine yourself in their shoes and discover the motivations. Now, while you are imagining yourself in their shoes, look for the similarities. What are you've seen? You're looking at the differences. Now look for the similarities. What are the similarities between the two of you? And make note of those, because as we come into this second step, be aware of your own emotional landscape. What is it that is triggering you right now, and why is that trigger so effective? What is it about your experience? What is it about the situation and how this present situation in your experience has created some kind of trigger that is causing you to react however you are reacting? A trigger is not necessarily a bad thing. A trigger is just a response that is often useful. It's a quick response that allows you to respond to dangerous situations quickly. But that trigger is also effective in all situations that you are in. What is your trigger? What's the emotional landscape that you are experiencing right now? Then, replace the anger that you're experiencing, and there is probably some anger. Now, you know that anger is a result of fear, right? It is a reaction to some fear that you have. So identify what those fears are as part of your emotional landscape, and realize that you are responding, whether you think you are or not. There is an aspect of your interaction with the present moment, an interaction with the present relationship, that is based upon some fear that you might have. And then, lo and behold, ask the other of their perspective. Now, unless you have gone through these first two steps, asking the other of his or her perspective may be wasted effort, right? Because if you have not yet imagined yourself in their shoes, or you haven't evaluated your own emotional landscape, asking the other for their perspective is going to perhaps have a response in you of, yeah, that's stupid, right? Whatever, you are priming yourself to be open and receptive to the answer that is given when you ask their perspective, if first you imagine yourself in their shoes and you also assess your own emotional landscape. So this is a practice that allows you to understand, at least understand, maybe not agree with, but at least understand how the other person is reacting to that shared experience, whatever that shared experience is. Now, this is not necessarily an easy thing to do. I mean, there are 3 steps. That's pretty simple, right? At least I didn't come out here with 9 steps. Here are the 9 steps that you need to do to make this work. 3 steps. Imagine, assess, and ask. Imagine what it would be like in their shoes, assess your own emotional landscape, and then ask the other for their perspective. Facebook might not be a very good place to do that. However, an interesting thing about Facebook is that you can go to the profile of the respondent and get a sense of where they're coming from, right? You can find out where they're educated. You can find out where they're living. You can find out, whether or not they're married. You can find out if they have any children. You can take a look at their photographs, and you can see what is of interest to them, or at least what they're capturing and offering to the public. So Facebook, from that standpoint, might give you a little bit more perspective than someone that you are interacting with going down I-25 at 65 miles an hour. So there is some opportunity in social media for you to practice and get into this. This is not necessarily easy. It is fairly straightforward, but you have to remember to do the steps. And I would suggest that you practice this, because when it comes down to it and you're flat up against someone's spittle as they're spewing you in their reaction to what you have just said or what you've just done, it would be useful to have the tools honed to imagine, to assess, and to ask. So imagine how your loved ones are feeling. Imagine where they're coming from. Imagine the relationship with your loved ones. And then assess your own emotional landscape as it relates to some interaction that you're having with your loved one. And then ask your loved one for their perspective on the situation. And that is going to allow you to practice in a fairly safe environment. Then you might want to practice this with a neighbor. And then you might want to practice this with someone in the political opposition. I keep coming back to that. Not everybody has the kind of political passion that I might have, but nonetheless, for me, that is where my gem of consciousness is. That's where the greatest practice that I can express is in that political landscape. So this is it. If you are interested in having a more deep, satisfying relationship with people of all stripes, this is a method of getting into that. And the interesting thing is that it is our choice. This is something that will indeed lift us and empower us. It is something that will strengthen us, and it will something with practice we will be able to encounter each and every relationship in with a blessed perspective. That is to say that we will look upon each opportunity, each situation, each relationship as an opportunity for us to expand ourselves. It's a wonderful choice that we have. Let's make it. We'll have our meditation. As we come in this moment, in these few moments, let us practice the second step of evaluating our own emotional landscape. Allow yourself to settle into this time, relaxing, allowing yourself to look upon your own inner experience with fresh eyes. What are you feeling right now? Where are your thoughts focused? What seems to be the smooth areas of your inner experience? And where are the rough areas? Perhaps there's a situation that come to mind when I ask you to think about the last rough interaction that you had, the last conflict or contention that you had. Bring that to mind and notice whether or not there are any lingering effects of that experience. Are you still in that conflict? How does that feel? How does it feel? Have you released what needed to be released to allow that conflict to disappear? What about the last joyful experience that you've had? Was that a moment ago or an hour ago? Perhaps you've had several joyful moments in the last hour. But I'm not talking about the moment where everything seems to be okay, but rather the moments where you feel that life is so wonderful. You feel the blessings of your moment. When was that? How did that feel? Is that something that you repeat often, or is that a rarity in your own experience? And be honest with yourself, because no one's keeping track. There will be no test after this. But how often do you have those blessed moments? What are they like? Are they similar, or do they have different characteristics when they arise? Are they caused by relationships, or are they caused by experiences? How do those feel? As you look back over these two extreme experiences, the experiences of the blessed moment and the experiences of the conflicted moment, what do you notice different about them and your reaction to them? What do you gain from those two types of experiences? From the conflicted experience and the blessed experience? What do you gain? And which experience do you prefer? And be honest about that answer. Certainly without some gain from a conflicted experience, you would choose not to have them. So be honest. Assess your experiences and their benefit to you. And just pay attention. No judgment, Evaluation, certainly, but judgment is not necessary. Practice that assessment often, throughout the day. Just take a barometer check of consciousness. How are you feeling? What's up for you? What are the benefits of the present experience? So as we come back into this time and space, let us come back sharing the words of the Lord's Prayer.